continuing down into the questions, we're almost done here. In verse 20 and 21, what does everything is indeed clean mean? This is going to be similar to verses 14 through 18 above. It'll probably just be a conclusion to that particular discussion, so it won't take very long. But Paul says, again, he returns to this topic of food. Do not, for the sake of food, destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean. Again, this phrase, everything is indeed clean, we're going to have to look at this. We'll look at the Greek and we'll look at the underlying Hebrew and things like that and see if we can get into the mind of Paul and figure out what the theology is behind his phrase, everything is indeed clean. And he says, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. I like that word stumble because it reminds me of what he talked about earlier in chapter 11 about a national Israel stumbling over the stone of Messiah and over the offense of Gentiles being brought into Israel without having to change their ethnic status into Jewishness. So he continues in verse 21 by saying, it is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. This brings up a valuable theological question of whether or not Gentiles, even if they don't agree that the kosher laws are relevant for them, shouldn't they, in fact, appease or adopt or be considerate of the opinions of the Jewish people in the community, the weak in faith, when it comes to eating that which seems to be acceptable to Gentile Christians? Would Jewish people be offended by Gentile Christians eating non-kosher food and yet still calling themselves say members of God's household, right? Members of the family of God, Israelites, covenant members, things like that. I think we can get a lot of discussion out of that particular part of the chapter. And then lastly, my last question, this will finish out tonight's part of segment 1 for Romans 14. The question is asked, how do we keep the faith we have between ourselves and God? And this is a very strange question at the surface level. Again, covering verses 22 and 23. Paul says in verse 22, the faith that you have, keep between yourself and God. Who's he talking to? Is he talking to the Gentile Christians that they have this faith in God and that they should keep it between themselves and God? Aren't they supposed to be witnessing to other people? Shouldn't they be sharing the good news of Messiah with Jew and Gentile alike? Right? What does he mean? Keep your faith between yourself. And then he goes on later in the rest of the verse to say, blessed is one who has no reason to pass judgment on himself for what he approves. Right? So we're going to have to talk about what this passage means. He certainly can't mean do not share your faith with others. That disagrees with the rest of the apostolic scriptures and the message of the Bible as a whole, that we're supposed to share the good news of God's salvation with people that we meet. So we've got to understand what this passage means from the context and this verse. And then the last verse in the whole chapter says, but whoever has doubts is condemned if he eats. Again, the topic comes back to food. Notice it doesn't say he has doubts, he's condemned if he doesn't believe in Jesus or something like that. It talks about food. He's condemned if he eats because the eating is not from faith. For whatever does not proceed from faith is sin. This is going to bring us back full circle to what I believe is one of the central topics of the entire passage as a whole, and that is food and table fellowship and things related to covenant membership and viewing the other person across the table from you through the lens of the table fellowship and the shared community dynamics that are expressed between Jews and Gentiles who have come together, been thrust together, both expressing a monotheistic belief in God, and some of them expressing a belief in Jesus as Messiah, others not, some of them expressing a loyalty to Torah and others not, and all of the social dynamics that are at play between these two groups. Okay? We'll get to all that in time.